Akin, a young, handsome man from Nigeria, had always been wary of people's intentions. Raised by his mother, Alake, after his father's death, he had inherited a vast fortune and the responsibilities that came with it. Despite his wealth, Akin was humble and grounded, valuing sincerity and genuine connections above all else. After seeing friends and acquaintances fall victim to shallow relationships, he vowed to find a woman who loved him for who he was, not for his money. To achieve this, Akin decided to disguise his wealth. He dressed modestly, lived simply, and introduced himself as a man of limited means. In this guise, he met Adesa, a beautiful young woman with a radiant smile and an air of grace. She lived in a modest home with her parents, Pa Ojo and Mama Ojo, who were known in the community for their traditional values and wisdom. Adesa seemed to embody everything Akin desired in a partner: kindness, beauty, and an easy charm that made him feel at ease. Blinded by her allure, Akin overlooked the occasional moments when her true nature slipped through the cracks: her impatience, her subtle manipulations, and her insatiable appetite for material things. His love for her was so profound that he ignored the warning signs, believing that she was the one for him. After a brief courtship, Akin proposed to Adesa, and she accepted with enthusiasm. The traditional engagement ceremony was a joyous occasion, with blessings from both families. Pa Ojo and Mama Ojo were pleased that their daughter had found a man who, though modest in means, seemed to be of good character. With the wedding behind them, Akin and Adesa decided to move to London, hoping to start a new life in a different country. Akin, still maintaining his facade of modesty, assured Adesa that they would build a better future together. Unbeknownst to him, Adesa, however, quickly grew dissatisfied with their humble lifestyle. She began demanding more money, insisting on buying expensive clothes, jewelry, and other luxuries. Akin, still blinded by his love for her, tried to meet her demands, but the strain began to show. Adesa's true character slowly emerged. She was greedy, manipulative, and completely uninterested in the simple life Akin had envisioned. When their first child, a boy named Tand, was born, followed 2 years later by a girl named Kemi, Akin hoped that motherhood would soften Adesa's heart. Instead, her behavior grew worse. She began spending even more recklessly, stealing money from Akin's accounts, and having affairs with other men. Akin, desperate to save his marriage, tried to confront her, but she always found a way to turn the blame back on him, accusing him of being too controlling, too stingy, too focused on work. The final blow came when Adesa, tired of Akin's attempts to rein in her spending, falsely accused him of trying to kill her and their children. She staged a dramatic scene, calling the police and presenting fabricated evidence. Akin was arrested and, despite his protests of innocence, was sentenced to several years in prison. His heart broke as he was led away, knowing that the woman he had loved so deeply had betrayed him in the worst possible way. After years of incarceration, Akin was finally released from prison. He returned to the home he had once shared with Adesa, only to find it empty and stripped of all valuables. Adesa had taken most of his assets and fled with their children. She had remarried, hoping to continue her life of luxury, but her new husband soon discovered her true nature and left her in financial ruin. In a desperate attempt to maintain control over Tand and Kemi, Adesa lied to them, telling them that their father had died in prison. She kept them away from Akin, fearing that they would uncover the truth about her deceitful actions. Heartbroken and disillusioned, Akin returned to Nigeria. He moved back in with his mother, Alake, who was devastated to see her son in such a state. Akin vowed never to trust another woman again. He would live out the rest of his days alone, focusing on caring for his mother and managing what little remained of his father's business. But Alake was determined that her son would not spend the rest of his life in loneliness. She encouraged him to heal, to pray, and to believe that there was still a good woman out there for him. Despite Akin's deep wounds, Alake's words planted a seed of hope in his heart. After much persuasion, Akin reluctantly agreed to try again. He moved to a remote village where no one knew him and once again presented himself as a poor, hopeless man. He dressed simply, lived modestly, and kept his past a secret, determined to find a woman who would love him for who he was, not for what he had. In this village, Akin was largely ignored by the women who dismissed him as a beggar. But one woman, Olabisi, stood out. She was not as flashy or beautiful as the other women, but she had a warmth and kindness that drew Akin to her. Olabisi worked as a teacher at the local school, and her gentle heart was evident in the way she cared for the children. Akin was captivated by her sincerity and her willingness to treat him with kindness despite his apparent poverty. As they spent more time together, Akin saw in Olabisi a genuine soul, someone who valued honesty and integrity above all else. Olabisi, too, found herself drawn to Akin. She admired his humility and his quiet strength, and she appreciated the fact that he was not trying to impress her with wealth or status. She saw in him a man of character, someone who could be a good partner and father. As their bond grew stronger, Akin knew he had finally found the woman he had been searching for. Convinced of Olabisi's love, Akin revealed his true identity to her. He told her everything about his wealth, his past with Adesa, his time in prison, and his decision to hide his wealth to find true love. Olabisi listened quietly, her eyes filled with tears as Akin recounted his painful story. When he finished, she took his hand and said, "I love you, Akin, for the man you are, not for what you have. I will stand by you, no matter what." Akin and Olabisi were married in a simple, joyful ceremony. They lived happily together, and soon Olabisi gave birth to 3 children, 2 boys, and a girl. Akin's heart, once broken, was slowly healed by Olabisi's love and kindness. He found peace and joy in his new family, and he thanked God every day for bringing Olabisi into his life. Meanwhile, in London, Adesa's life had continued to unravel. Her new husband had left her, and she struggled to provide for herself and her children. The lies she had told Tand and Kemi about their father's death weighed heavily on her, and she knew she could not keep the truth from them forever. Finally, guilt-ridden and desperate, Adesa confessed everything to her children. She told them how she had lied about their father, how she had betrayed him and caused his imprisonment, and how she had taken them away from him. Tand and Kemi were devastated by the revelation. Angry and hurt, they decided to travel to Nigeria to find their father, hoping to seek his forgiveness and rebuild their relationship. Adesa saw this move as an opportunity to finally indulge in the luxurious lifestyle she had always dreamed of. In London, Akin worked tirelessly to provide for his new family. They lived in a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, far from the luxury Akin could easily afford. Still, he was content, believing that they were building a life based on love and mutual respect. When they arrived in Akin's hometown, they were filled with anxiety and uncertainty. They did not know how their father would react after so many years of estrangement. But when they finally found him, working in the fields outside the small house he now shared with Olabisi, their fears melted away. Akin looked up and saw his children standing before him, their faces a mix of hope and fear. Tears filled his eyes as he realized that despite everything, they had come back to him. Akin stood frozen, staring at the 2 teenagers before him. Tand, now a young man, bore a striking resemblance to his father, while Kemi, though still a girl, had the same bright eyes and delicate features as her mother. The years apart had aged Akin, and he felt a pang of guilt as he wondered what they must think of him, this man, weathered by time and hardship, whom they barely knew. For a moment, the 3 of them stood there in silence, the weight of the past hanging heavy between them. Then, Kemi took a tentative step forward, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Father, we are so sorry. We didn't know the truth." Tand followed, his voice thick with emotion. "We thought you were gone, that you were dead. We believed everything she told us. But now we know, and we just want to make things right." Akin felt tears welling up in his eyes. He had dreamed of this moment, but he had never imagined it would come with such a flood of emotions. Without a word, he opened his arms, and his children rushed into them, holding him tightly as if they were afraid to let go. The years of pain, betrayal, and separation melted away in that embrace, replaced by a fragile hope that perhaps, just perhaps, they could rebuild what had been lost. As they clung to each other, Akin's mind raced with memories of the day Tand was born, of Kemi's first steps, of the joyful moments he had once shared with them before everything had fallen apart. He felt a deep sorrow for the time they had lost, but also a profound gratitude that they had found their way back to him. Olabisi, who had been watching from a distance, approached quietly. She had heard bits and pieces of Akin's past, but seeing it unfold before her now brought tears to her eyes. She knew that this moment was not just about Akin reuniting with his children, it was about healing, about forgiveness, and about the possibility of a new beginning. When Akin finally released his hold on Tand and Kemi, he looked at them with a mixture of pride and sadness. "I thought I had lost you forever," he said softly. "But seeing you here now, it's more than I could have ever hoped for." Kemi wiped away her tears and looked up at her father. "We've lost so much time, but we are here now, and we want to be a part of your life again." Tand nodded in agreement. "We've come all this way to find you, father. We want to make up for the time we've lost. We want to know you." Akin smiled through his tears, his heart swelling with a hope he hadn't felt in years. "And I want to know you, too. There's so much to talk about, so much to catch up on." Olabisi stepped forward then, placing a gentle hand on Akin's shoulder. "There's plenty of time for that," she said with a warm smile. "But for now, let's just be grateful that you found each other again." Tand and Kemi turned to Olabisi, their faces full of curiosity. They had been so focused on finding their father that they hadn't given much thought to who else might be in his life. Akin noticed their questioning looks and introduced Olabisi with a mixture of pride and affection. "This is Olabisi," he said. "She's my wife, and she's been my rock through all of this. Without her, I don't know where I'd be." Olabisi smiled kindly at Tand and Kemi. "I've heard so much about you both," she said. "I'm so glad you're here. Your father has missed you more than you can imagine." Kemi, still holding on to Akin's hand, looked at Olabisi with a mix of emotions. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for taking care of him." Olabisi's smile widened. "He's taken care of me just as much, if not more. You'll see, he's a wonderful man." Tand looked at his father, a newfound respect in his eyes. "We are looking forward to getting to know you again, father. And you too, Olabisi." As the days passed, Tand and Kemi slowly adjusted to their new surroundings. The village, with its serene landscapes and simple way of life, was a far cry from the bustling city of London they were used to. But the quiet peace of the countryside seemed to be exactly what they needed. Akin, for his part, was overjoyed to have his children back in his life. He spent his days showing them around the village, introducing them to his work, then sharing stories of their childhood that they had long forgotten. Tand and Kemi, in turn, opened up about their lives with Adesa, revealing the pain and confusion they had endured growing up with a mother who had been so consumed by her own desires. But as much as they tried to move forward, the shadows of the past continued to linger. Kemi, in particular, struggled with feelings of anger and betrayal. She had loved her mother deeply, and learning the truth about Adesa's actions had shaken her to her core. At night, she would lie awake, haunted by memories of her mother's lies and the realization that the woman she had trusted most in the world had deceived her. One evening, as the family sat together after dinner, Kemi couldn't hold it in any longer. She looked at Akin, her eyes filled with tears, and asked the question that had been burning inside her since she arrived. "Father, how did you survive it? How did you get through everything she did to you?" Akin sighed, his heart heavy with the weight of the memories. "It wasn't easy," he admitted. There were times when I didn't think I'd make it. But I held on to the hope that one day, the truth would come out. And I prayed for strength, for guidance, and for the chance to see you both again. Tand, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Do you still hate her? Akin looked at his son, his expression thoughtful. I don't know if I ever hated her, he said slowly. I was angry, yes. Devastated. But hate is a heavy burden to carry. I've tried to let go of that for my own sake. Holding on to hate would have destroyed me. Kemi wiped away her tears and nodded, though she still seemed troubled. I want to forgive her, she said softly. But I don't know how. Olabisi, who had been quietly listening, spoke up then. Forgiveness is a process, Kemi, she said gently. It doesn't happen overnight. And it's okay if you're not ready yet. But know this, holding on to anger will only hurt you in the long run. Your father is right, hate is a burden. It's something you have to let go of, bit by bit, if you want to find peace. Kemi nodded, though her heart still felt heavy. She wasn't sure if she could ever truly forgive her mother, but she knew she had to try, for her own sake, and for the sake of her relationship with her father. Just as the family began to settle into their new routine, a visitor arrived in the village, bringing with them a wave of uncertainty and tension. It was Adesa. Desperate and broken, Adesa had followed her children to Nigeria, unable to bear the thought of losing them completely. She arrived at Akin's doorstep one rainy afternoon, her once beautiful face gaunt and haggard, her clothes soaked and clinging to her frail frame. Akin was shocked to see her, standing there on his doorstep, looking nothing like the woman who had once betrayed him. Olabisi, sensing the tension, took Tand and Kemi inside, leaving Akin and Adesa alone. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, neither knowing what to say. Finally, Adesa spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, Akin. For everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I had to come. I had to see our children. Akin remained silent, his emotions a tumultuous mix of anger, pity, and an unexpected sense of closure. He had never imagined seeing Adesa again, let alone under these circumstances. Adesa continued, her voice trembling with emotion. I've lost everything, Akin. The life I thought I wanted, it's gone. All I have left are Tand and Kemi. Please, don't take them away from me. Akin's heart softened slightly as he listened to her plea, but he couldn't ignore the pain she had caused. You took them away from me, Adesa. You destroyed our family, and now you expect me to just let you back into their lives. Adesa's tears mingled with the rain as she shook her head. I don't expect anything, Akin. I just want a chance to make things right. Please, let me see them. Let me explain. Akin sighed, his mind racing. He didn't trust Adesa, but he knew that Tand and Kemi had the right to hear her out. After a long pause, he finally nodded. I'll let them decide if. Akin reluctantly allowed Adesa to see Tand and Kemi, but only under his watchful eye. The children, initially shocked and hesitant, agreed to meet with their mother. They gathered in the small living room of Akin's home, the air thick with tension. Adesa, her heart heavy with regret, looked at her children with tears in her eyes. I know I've hurt you both in ways I can never undo, she began, her voice trembling. I was selfish, I was blinded by greed, and I betrayed the people who loved me the most. But I never stopped loving you. Kemi, struggling to hold back her tears, spoke first. You lied to us, mother. You told us father was dead. How could you do that? How could you take us away from him? Adesa wept openly now, her face a picture of remorse. I was afraid, Kemi. Afraid that you would hate me if you knew the truth. Afraid of losing you. But I see now that I've already lost so much. I'm so sorry, my daughter. Turned, though more reserved, couldn't hide the anger in his voice. You destroyed our family, mother. You hurt father in ways we can barely understand. How do we forgive that? Adesa nodded, her sobs quieting. I don't know if you can, Turned. I don't expect you to. But I'm asking you, both of you, to give me a chance to make amends. I want to be a part of your lives again, in whatever way you'll allow. Akin, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke. Adesa, you've caused us all a lot of pain. And while I've tried to forgive you for what you did to me, it's up to Turned and Kemi to decide how they want to move forward. I won't stand in their way if they choose to forgive you. But understand this, you have to earn their trust again, and that won't happen overnight. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed Akin's words. Turned and Kemi exchanged glances, silently communicating their shared confusion and pain. After what seemed like an eternity, Kemi finally spoke. We need time, she said quietly, looking at her mother. We don't know if we can forgive you yet, but we'll try. We'll try because you're our mother, and because holding on to this pain isn't helping any of us. Turned nodded in agreement, though his face remained somber. We'll give you a chance, mother. But it's up to you to prove that you've changed. Adesa, though heartbroken by the distance still between them, nodded gratefully. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving me this chance. I promise, I'll do everything I can to make things right. In the months that followed, Adesa made a genuine effort to rebuild her relationship with Turned and Kemi. She remained in the village, living humbly and working hard to prove that she had changed. Though the process was slow and often painful, small steps were made toward healing. Akin and Olabisi supported the children as they navigated their complex emotions, encouraging them to seek peace and closure. Olabisi, in particular, became a comforting presence in their lives, offering wisdom and kindness that helped them cope with the turbulent emotions they faced. As time passed, the tension within the family began to ease. Turned and Kemi, though still wary, gradually opened their hearts to their mother again. They spent time together, talking about the past, the mistakes that were made, and the possibility of a future built on honesty and trust. Akin, too, found a measure of peace. Seeing his children find their way back to him and watching them rebuild their relationship with their mother gave him hope that the wounds of the past could finally heal. In the end, Adesa decided to remain in the village, close to her children but respectful of the boundaries they had set. She continued to work on herself, determined to be a better mother and a better person. Though the scars of the past would never fully fade, they no longer defined her or her relationship with her family. Turned and Kemi, now young adults, took the lessons they had learned from their parents' mistakes and applied them to their own lives. They understood the value of honesty, the importance of trust, and the power of forgiveness. And as they grew, they carried these lessons with them, vowing never to repeat the mistakes of the past. Akin and Olabisi continued to live happily together, their love strengthened by the trials they had faced. They knew that life would always have its challenges, but they also knew that together they could face anything. Here are the moral lessons we can generate from this story into our lives. True love goes beyond material wealth. Akin's initial mistake was thinking that love could be tested by material deprivation alone. True love is built on honesty, trust, and mutual respect, not on wealth or poverty. Deception leads to destruction. Adesa's deceitful actions led to the destruction of her family and her own downfall. Lies and manipulation may bring temporary gains, but they ultimately lead to suffering and loss. Forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. Both Akin and his children learned that forgiveness is not something that happens overnight. It requires time, understanding, and a willingness to heal old wounds. Personal growth is possible, even after mistakes. Adesa's journey shows that it's never too late to change. While the consequences of her actions were severe, her willingness to seek forgiveness and make amends demonstrates the power of personal growth. Honesty and patience are key in relationships. Akin's story underscores the importance of being honest and patient when choosing a life partner. Rushing into relationships without truly understanding the other person's character can lead to heartbreak and regret. The power of family bonds. Despite the pain and betrayal, the bond between Akin, Tan, and Kemi was strong enough to endure. Family connections, when nurtured with love and care, can overcome even the deepest wounds. The story ends with a sense of hope, showing that while the past cannot be changed, the future can always be shaped by the choices we make today. Thank you for watching, but don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories like this.